really wrestling with, okay, what's the 5 things that I should be doing, and just saying no to everything else. And I drove out to one of these little spots out here that we can look out, though it's kind of, the wind is there, and there's some people around, so I didn't want to chat out there and let them listen in on the conversation. So anyways, I can't get the camera quite how I want it, but we'll leave it as is and go from there. So how'd the week go? Well, this Sunday went good. We just came off money talk, and money's always one of those things, like, is this going to go over well? But I believe we need to talk about money. It's a discipleship issue. A lot of people in our my setting struggle with it. This area is actually, at least compared to the rest of the province, has probably less money. It's really important, and it's really about the basics, right? And teaching people normal budgets. So I had some good conversation afterwards in response to people. Probably those who aren't happy, though I don't really have that much in that category, would express if they were. But I believe we need to preach about money, so I did that, and just talked about, gave some practical skills as well, and like making a budget. And the challenge for me is, I actually gave parts of this message already once this year. It's just revamping it and sharing it. We looked at Timothy, where he tells us go tell the rich not to be proud and put their hope in Christ. And so that's what we did, or I did, I should say. And went okay. And then this coming Sunday I have off. I'm just gonna move the camera here because I'm not happy with it. So this coming Sunday I have off, and the week I was away at a retreat for a couple of days. And there's still lots of me as I'm learning a new denomination and its ways and its rhythms. For me, I did not connect well with the talk part and the music part. Could have been where I'm at, could have been their style, who knows, you know the drill around all of that. But for me, one of the things that was important coming out of this was actually the small conversations with people. And so one of the great things, I'm part of a discipleship huddle with some other, I think they're all pastors that are part of that. At least full-time ministry. And so we've been meeting over Zoom for I don't know how many months now, and finally actually got to meet face to face. And so that was good. I guess 2 guys weren't there, but the other 3 were. And so we got to chat, and it was good. Went out for some, after the one night, we went out for some drinks and food, and of course the drive, some great conversation. And then, because there was a larger group that we were with, we kind of ended the conversation, but we were wrestling around discipleship and where we're at in church and ministry. Had a really good conversation at the morning we were supposed to leave. So there was nothing scheduled. They said you could stay overnight if you'd like, and they didn't have anything planned. It was just breakfast. And so we got it for breakfast, and conversations happening, and then conversation really happened. It's like that deeper level. And so we were a good 2 hours later in leaving, but that was a very healthy conversation. Some denominational leaders came in as we really just were wrestling with our context and how do you make disciples? Can you actually transition a church? Is it actually possible? And we wrestled with that a lot, and just the challenge of that, and one guy's like, I don't know if it's possible. And in my hope, I hope it's possible, but I don't know if it is possible. And I think it's possible because Jesus said he can change us. But we recognize the incredible hard reality of taking an institutional, established congregation and moving them to more of a discipleship context and philosophy, let's say, of ministry and way of doing it, as compared to, at least in North America, many that have been program driven. Sunday driven is probably actually a better word, where Sunday's everything. It's where we think we have fellowship, we think care is happening, and we think we're making disciples, but the truth is we're not. One of the interesting things too that came out of that, so that was a huge wrestle, and I don't know what your context is, but it's something I'm quite frustrated with, because there's got to be more than just Sunday morning. One of the other guys talked about at this point in his life, he can do Sunday morning without thinking anymore. And it's not that he doesn't care anymore, but some of the challenge is gone, and some of the to be honest, I think it's just, there's got to be more than this. And it's not a bad thing. It's just a wrestling with what have we produced in here in North America in this context that I think I've said it before. We believe church, our culture believes church. They see it as Sunday morning in the building, and so do our own people. But that's not who Christ calls us to. And how do we move people? Of course, it's way easier to start something new. I'm not sure it's actually way easier. You just have different challenges. But we wrestled a bit with that too. And I think it was Spent Matches I read where they talked about, or that book author talked about a hybrid approach where you kind of do it alongside the existing things. And my interpretation is almost you let one area eventually die. The thing is, God's still going to use it. God's still going to call people through that type of ministry, but we have to make the shift to discipleship. And how do we do that? And so he argues in there about a hybrid approach and moving together in that. And I'd love to sit down with the author. You guys got any connections? Let's sit down and just pick his brain and what his experience has been since he wrote the book. I'd love to hear that, and what he's learned since then. Kind of what would be a part two. Maybe you guys can help me connect with him, or that the team they had. I can't even remember if it was a team or one person at the moment, but it was a good book. Spend Match is a good book. It's actually, probably should go back and reread it. It's one of those, just what can I pull out from my own context. What else do we wrestle with in that? I forgot now. There was something I had and I kept going. One of the things we talked about too, some of the denominational leaders were there, was, they commented about how, just like in some of our congregations, most organizations, you have 20% of the people doing 80% of the work. And so how do we spend time with the 20%? And one of the things they shared, it's the same at a higher up level as a denomination. 20% of the churches or 20% of the pastors, they're the ones who's really doing the kingdom work, who are really wrestling with the questions that we need to be wrestling with as we move the kingdom forward and in discipleship. And then you have a large chunk that are, and this is leaders, and maybe you're there. I'll challenge you. Are they just placeholders? And there could be a number of reasons around that. I wonder, in our context, we have a lot of people retiring in North America, and it's happening now. There's a massive transition and what some would argue a shortage of pastors. I think our system has resulted in where we are. It's not unique to churches. You see it in some of the other industries as well. But the church has really not done well at raising up the next generation of leaders. And I think a lot of that's because we put too much on pastors. And pastors put too much on themselves, and it hasn't always been about discipling. I listened to a podcast. It's probably connected to discipleship.org, but I can't remember. And one of the things they talked about is just go make disciples, like the church staff in this one church they were interviewing, and just forget about everything else. Make disciples. Let that be your focus. And if you got to pull time from here, the lead pastor was saying that he's letting his staff do that so they can make disciples. And I was reminded of that podcast and some of the challenges some of the guys have faced, and in light of my own burnout that I've experienced. And I really pushed hard on the one gentleman, maybe too hard, I don't know, but you got to say no, and really wrestling with, okay, what's the 5 things that I should be doing, and just say no to everything else. And trust me, there's tons. Like, our YouTube live streaming sucks. It's horrible. It needs work. There's so much more we could do with video in our place. Do I have time to do all the editing and to fix everything? No, but maybe given enough time, it could be maybe it's one of the goals next year that we're going to grow in that area and fix that. But I also have a talent challenge and a knowledge and a skill set challenge in my context. So that makes it harder. Though I might know how to do it, again, I got to train up people, so it takes longer. I even wonder, what is the value of live streaming? I actually do believe in it. I believe in videos. I'm not convinced it's doing what we think we are. And I would argue some are putting way too much effort for a crappy product, but are putting way too much into it. For what? How is it feeding into making disciples? Do you actually have a process for that? I'm not saying we get rid of it. I actually do think there's value. We had people, and I just chuckle at how how God works, because we had people, oh yeah, I've been checking out your live stream for about a month now, and then thought I would come, and I chuckle because I'm like, man, our live stream is not good. It sounds way better inside. We're not super talented, and though I have been in situations where we had no musicians, and I am so thankful for musicians right now in my life. Like, they are very talented and take care of our music side. That is not a strength for me. But it just in the midst of our weakness, God's still using that. And I got some other stories I could share around that. But I think we need to do better. But also, I only got so much time. And that was part of the challenge, is like, for pastors, like, look at your life right now. Let me just talk to the pastors. I don't know who's listening, but I'm assuming you're in ministry. You're in some kind of ministry leadership. You want to make disciples. You're curious about pastoring, and what are you actually doing? Like, when you look at how you spend your time, are you actually making an impact for the kingdom? Do you need to be doing what you're doing? This is why I asked the question, what are the 5 things you should be doing? Because sometimes I find myself wondering, what kind of impact does this have? And I'd rather prioritize, this Saturday morning men's group that I started. That's what's important. Even preaching. Now I'm at a point, because I've done this for long enough. I have enough experience. I'm getting more familiar with the text. I can draw an experience. Now, I think some will argue even you got to be careful and you're not just kind of floating through. And that's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, as you start to do things longer, you can do them faster. And it's not shortcuts. You just know how to prep properly. And I would argue some of us are probably doing too much study for our sermon on Sunday, because it's knowledge-based and we're trying to get all the knowledge. But the fact is, they're going to forget 90% of what you said. So what is those 5 things they need to know? Share a little bit. It's good to know context and background and Greek words. Those all have their place. I use them. But how will that help make disciples? How will that push people? And I think that's where you have to start to learn the discernment of the voice of God, to know where to go in the midst of that. But all that comes back around to pastors. Do you need to be full-time? Like, some are running around stressed out. Man, I've had weeks. I've had busy weeks. But I'm starting to ask the question, am I really busy? Or do I just think I'm busy? Because, see, I started walking with people who talk all the time about being busy. And then I start to look at their life and I'm like, but that's not hard. Now, it might be hard for them, so I could get some pushback on that. But I wonder, as a culture where we think we're busy, we're actually not busy. And I do wonder if we're lazy as a culture, but, I'm not calling pastors out saying you're lazy, though some of us probably are. So, yeah, I'm wrestling with that in the context of making disciples. I'm wrestling too, because I'm finding, I don't know anybody that's doing this. We do have in our denomination, one of our leaders was saying, someone who is making some progress, but frustrated because they're not as far as where they want. Actually, I hope I can bring them on to interview and we can hear a bit of the journey and what's going on. And I hear, I listen to podcasts and I'm just sick of the commercialism that's in them. Like, hey, it's almost like, and I want to be careful because I'm not trying to undercut these guys, but there's just do this and you'll have all these people come to faith and you'll have this big church. And I get, it doesn't sit well with me, though I think their intention is right. Does that make sense? Yeah, you always get the guys that their intention is not good, but let's forget about them for a moment. But buy this program and do it. Now, I think they're actually trying to help the church, and I think the church is in trouble in the sense that we're not asking the right questions. And a lot of our churches, in my context in Canada, I know over the next decade, probably 50% will shut down. Now, I think some of that has to happen because in order for new growth to happen, death has to happen. So I'm not worried about that. And Jesus said that, Jesus wasn't worried. The kingdom's going to grow. The thing is, he's calling up leaders right now to move us forward. Maybe that's you. We need to work together. And we're having that conversation in our neighborhood, right? My community here. One of the meetings we had was we sat down and with a school that is connected to EMCC and talked about how could we run a discipleship school using them, using them. They would help us with the teaching. We do the practical. And so you can get some of that Bible school foundation, which is really important. And then we provide the practical experience. We talked about 2 tracks. There's this one track, which we just need to probably first focus on discipleship. There's a second track of ministry leaders for the kingdom. We talked a lot about pastors and raising those up and how's that look. And I don't know where that conversation is going to go, but I'd love to see, there's 5, I think, churches of the same denomination that are within 40 minutes of each other. So how do we work together? And really trying to speak to that. And I see one of the other guys starting to, the ideas are starting to flow. But even he's got only a couple years left before retirement. And I don't know how that fits in, but in what God's going to do in there. And, I've been asking the Lord, can I just stay here forever? And I really think the bigger vision I have, that it's actually going to have to happen. But I just got to trust him in all of that. I will make disciples wherever we go. But in this context, I really want to see that generational discipleship. And I actually don't know anywhere in the country right now, and I understand I'm pretty limited in experience, where that's happening. Even one of the guys who's been doing some stuff for a long time said they started to get momentum and then it died. And there's this real consumerism challenge that exists in our culture around this. Give me the book, we do the program, and then we're done. We haven't caught the bigger vision for the kingdom, and we think too small. And how do we move leaders in a direction that helps us? Because this actually came out of the last day morning too. It's not just about training pastors. It's actually how are we training leadership teams, our governing boards, so that they have a vision for the kingdom, because it's them who are leading the church. And a lot of times denominations might put effort into pastors, but how do we actually do it for the board or ministry? We call ours ministry council. I don't care what you call it, but that governing structure, those things are important. Who's ever in charge? What teams are there who are driving and pushing forward? So coming out of the retreat, all of those things are there, and those conversations again continue to push. How do we make disciples? And it's a bit of my journey this week, so hopefully there's something there to get you thinking. It's what I'm thinking through, trying to just stay faithful and push as well. Just I think this week I'm reminded of the beauty of the area I live in. As I took my wife to work this morning, there was deer on the road. As I, the beauty of the trees in my area. Down south where we were before on the retreat, they weren't as far ready yet, but the trees are turning, and it's just absolutely beautiful. And got some great pictures last night. The Northern Lights were out all across the country, and it's quite strong here in my area as well. But it was absolutely beautiful. I'll throw some of those pictures up as well. Take a moment wherever you find yourself in your context and just go for a walk in nature and listen for the voice of God and the beauty of life. Allow God to speak through nature. Let your heart be stirred and stand in awe of his goodness. Go make disciples. Take care.